Okay, so what I did for the purpose of this demo was I installed Oracle Application Express or Oracle 11G Express, which comes
Okay.
with this Application Express web portal. Um, and inside Oracle, I've set up a couple databases to test with, um, just for the purpose of showing how everything is intended to work here. Um,
Okay.
so what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and log into Oracle, and together we will take a look at the data tables, and we'll look at one of the tables that we will migrate. So here's all the tables I'll have access to as Stan, and here you can see a list of. So these are all, as you know, these are system tables, ACLs, stuff like that. Um, and then down below, I have these demo tables, which have orders and customers, order items, things of that nature. So the idea was, how are we going to take all the data in this customers table and create customer objects in Alfresco? As you can see, we have, let's see, we have 7 unique customers, all with various degrees of metadata. So the first thing we did was create an Alfresco model. I thought I had it open, but I don't. Here we go. So we've created an Alfresco model that will house our customer information. Um, that configuration is being stored in an AMP file, and the AMP will be applied to our Alfresco environment, giving us the option to create those types. So here we have the type my customer, and if we go back to our data table, we have customer first name, last name, some address information, phone numbers, and credit limit. I didn't grab every piece of metadata. I didn't think that'd be necessary for the purpose of a demo, but I did grab first and last name. We have an address, and then we have the city, state, and zip code of the customer. Um, so what we want to do is display this and house this metadata in Alfresco so that when users want to access a customer in Alfresco, they can search for them uh, using any of these metadata fields. So this is where I introduced Simflofy. So Simflofy is a tool that's used primarily for things like migration, federated search, um, and for large enterprise applications where content might be spread across multiple resources. It gives users a single hub to access data from a multitude of repositories, databases, content stores, things of that nature. So I'm just going to log in to my admin credentials. And here you'll see integration, discovery. Um, the focus of this demo is a migration. So we're mostly going to be looking at the integration piece and discovery. So I'm actually going to start with discovery. Discovery allows you to look at a database or a content repository and discover what types are available. And this is important when it comes to mapping those types. So before you can move content across, you have to map metadata properties and things of that nature. So um, by creating a discovery instance, so this is our JDBC discovery instance, we're telling Simflofy we want you to connect to our Oracle database. We're going to give them a JDBC URL. We'll tell them what driver to use, and then some specifics like the schema pattern, which is basically just the schema name, um, user credentials, and because Simflofy is actually going to store this data in a Mongo database, we can tell it what we'd like to name that database. So this is the collection name in Mongo. Um, once we have all of this together, all we have to do is go to our discovery instances and hit run. And this is going to actually crawl that database. It's going to connect using a JDBC connector and look at what's available in that database. So here you can see basically the same thing we saw in our object browser, right? Which is some system tables and then our actual data tables down below. And you'll see why this is so handy in a moment, but if we take a look at customers, we'll be able to see column names, data types, things of that nature. So, and then we did the same thing with Alfresco. Again, this discovery is going to help us later on when we go to do all the mapping of properties. So if I run it against Alfresco, we'll get a list of all the types in Alfresco. There's folders, documents, and so what I'm looking for is my custom type. So I created a type called customer. So here's customer. And here you can see all of my properties. And you can also see the system properties that are available through the CMIS API. So to connect to Oracle, using JDBC. To connect to Alfresco, we're using CMIS.
Okay.
Cool. Any questions so far?
No, sounds good.
Okay, fantastic. All right, now we are going to get into the nitty-gritty of migration. So to do the migration, we're going to focus on this integration side panel, and we need two things. We need a repository connector, which is going to be our source location, and we need an output connection. This is going to be where all the content is dumped. So we'll start with the repository connection, and you'll see I've already created one for Oracle 11g Express, and the properties are going to be similar to what we had for the discovery. We'll tell it username and password. We'll also pick, we have the option to create custom connectors if we need to. For this demo, we just use the default JDBC processor. And we can dictate the number of connections and that sort of thing. Once you've got it set up, you can just do a test and say, okay, good, it's working. It can communicate with the database server. And then we need our output connection. So this is going to, this is where we're going to set up our Alfresco output connector, which again is going to be very similar to the discovery connector. We'll give it some CMIS configuration, including the URL to access the Atom Pub binding of CMIS. We can give it a folder path. So just having the name Simflofy in there, we'll put this at the root path in a folder. All the content will go into the root path in a folder called Simflofy. Now, we can change this. We can add rules and tasks so that content will be moved into other locations.
Yeah.
So we've got our CMIS configuration. Again, once it's all set, we can test it and make sure Simflofy is able to connect. So now what we need to do is create a job, and that job is actually going to handle the action of moving content from one store to another. So if I list jobs, you can see I've put one together, and it's a simple migration using the output connection of Alfresco and the repo connection of Oracle. So I'm just going to edit this so we can look at the details. And you can see some of the advanced features that I'm not really going to show off today, but they are in there. We can do some auditing, which will allow us to audit all the transactions and even track those by putting them into a Mongo collection.
Okay.
We can set up email notifications. This is more important when you're dealing with 1 billion documents rather than a few 100,000, because it might take a while for it to finish, right? So it could go on for days. And then we have some finite settings if we wanted to set time zones, if we wanted to kick off the job at a certain time, we can do that as well. So now the fun stuff. Let's take a look at the mapping. This is where we'll actually map fields from our database table to content in Alfresco. Because we've done our discovery, it makes it very simple. So here you'll see our repository discovery, and here you can see our output discovery, which is pointing to the Alfresco local and the Oracle Express, respectively. These are made available after you set up that discovery instance and run it. So because I did that, I can now find a field from our demo customers table. So you can see all of the fields are listed. And I can map it to my customer type in Alfresco and select any of the fields from my type.
So does that have to, for each document type we create, would be like
Right.
its own mapping?
Right. So yes, we would set up a mapping for each document type. We could even break it apart and set up separate jobs for each document type if we wanted to keep those segregated. It really kind of depends. We could put, we could have a list of 100 different mappings on this page.
Okay.
Now the cool thing is, so here I have customer street address 1, but when I look, there's 2 street address fields. So if I wanted to combine those and take that combined string and push it to Alfresco as the my customer address field, I can do that with Simflofy's API, which allows me to make calculated fields. There is a reference, let me find it here. It kind of shows you some of the functions that are available. So you can use basic logic, you can do string functions, if you needed to trim anything or replace. So this is a lot of the simple stuff. If you have to do some simple cleanup of a field before mapping it, it's easily available. Now, if there's more complex transformations that a field needs to go through, that would be handled in a task, and I'll show you where we do that in a moment. So what I'm going to do is I would like to combine those 2 address fields into the single target field. So what I've done is, in fact, I'll just type it out. So we're going to take demo customers dot cust street address 1 and close that. And we'll put a space between them. And we'll add in the street address 2. And then close that. So we're going to combine street address 1 with street address 2. This is going to be a calculated field, and we're going to map it to my address, my customer address in Alfresco. So once I've done that, I will save the job so I don't lose any changes. And then I'm going to go back in there and look at the tasks. So this is where you could set up jobs to run before or after the migration is complete. If we need to do some cleanup on fields, we would do that as a job task. If we wanted to say, kick off a script in Alfresco to clean up files that have been migrated, we can do that as a post-processing task. And this can be any number of things, right? So it could be a web call. They're very easy to create and configure. Simflofy is very modular that way. So it's really catered to each job, right? So we'll figure out what can be handled through simple mapping, and anything that doesn't fit in that spectrum, we'll look at creating a task for that. And then we have the SQL query. So this is where I'm actually pulling the data into our migration. So this is basic SQL. We can do joins as well. So each row will be processed as a document. And then based on our mappings, will be mapped to a type. And then all of the subsequent properties will be mapped to that type as well.
All right.
Okay, now for the fun part. Let's see if it works. So here I'm in Alfresco. I'm in just the root repository folder. And I'm going to go to the job status and monitoring page. And you can see I obviously preemptively ran this to make sure I wasn't going to be embarrassed when I got on here. But I will go ahead and kick off this job. I can refresh. It's only, again, there's only 7 records, right? And it looks like it completed. So let's go back into Alfresco and take a look. So here's my Simflofy folder that was just created. And here is each of those records. So if we go back to the mapping and take a look, we'll see that the name of the Alfresco record was set to the customer ID. So far that looks pretty good. Now, we don't have any content. We're not pulling files from a file system in this demo. But if we did, what we would do is set that file content, the binary content of that file, to the content of the Alfresco node, and then we would add the MIME type field. So you get a preview in Alfresco. And then here you can see the customer metadata properties. First name, last name, address is all available. You can edit these properties in Alfresco. And then I think we only had one that had a combined address. So let's go take a look at customer ID number 5. And that's where we did our calculated field. You can see that it combined those 2 fields into the output.